What's up, everyone? You're listening to the Wildcast podcast. I'm Justin Spears here with my guy Micah Lev, talking lots of foosball today on this episode. We appreciate you guys for listening to us, whether it's on Apple or Spotify, and we also appreciate our video watchers on Tucson.com. You can find the video version of this podcast on our website. And like I said, Lev, we're going to be talking a lot of football. We're going to be recapping the spring football schedule that's officially in the books. We're going to also kind of take a look at some transfer portal needs. And then later on in this podcast, Lev has all sorts of spicy takes regarding Tetairoa McMillan. But don't worry, it's actually more in defense of T-Mac because, man, he's gotten quite a bit of guff over the last couple months leading up to this NFL draft. But the NFL draft is important, man. We got T-Mac going to get drafted, could potentially be the highest selected Wildcat in NFL draft history. It's not looking like that when you look at some of these mock drafts, but hey, number 7 is that number. If he gets taken higher than 7, then T-Mac will be in a class of his own, but certainly going to be a first round pick because he's one of 17 guys in attendance at the NFL draft. But yeah, Lev and I are going to talk about T-Mac, talk about Arizona Wildcats in the NFL draft later on in this podcast. But let's talk about the current Arizona Wildcats right now. The football team just concluded spring ball. We saw the red-blue spring showcase this past Saturday at Arizona Stadium. And I got to give a lot of credit to Brent Brennan and his staff because, Arizona, they went 4-8 last season. But if you just kind of look at the vibes around the team, you wouldn't have known that they went 4-8. And Brent Brennan understands that there is a sector of the fan base that does not care about what they do in this offseason. They only care about the wins and in how are they going to win in fall. And rightfully so. Like, I understand, how some Arizona fans feel that way. But Brent Brennan was like, there's nothing I can do that can win over a portion of the fan base. But I think with the additions they made in the transfer portal, with the coaching hires they've made, starting with Seth Dagey, who's kind of an up and coming offensive mind who has, he doesn't have like the super in-depth play calling resume, but man, in his short time as a play caller, he's been pretty damn successful. And when you look at kind of the relationship that he has with Noah Fafita, being a former quarterback himself, he understands what it's going to take to really maximize Noah's talents. And that's getting the ball out of his hands quickly, playing with intent, playing this up-tempo brand of football that Arizona didn't play with last season. And then adding guys like Joe Salavea. I mean, we've talked about this guy being potentially a defensive coordinator or maybe even a head coach. And now he's your defensive line coach / associate head coach. And then fast forward to this past Saturday, with college football and the way it is right now, in the world of revenue sharing and NIL, there are collectives, there are agents that are monitoring every single spring game, every little practice. They've got eyes all over the country trying to make these deals for their clients or maybe even teams / NIL collectives. And they're out here recruiting players. Hey, look at this guy that may be a second stringer somewhere else, but man, he had 4 touchdowns in the spring game. Let's give him a boatload of money and get him to come away from that school. And we're seeing it all over. And there's also the health factor. Like Brent Brennan has said that Arizona wants to make sure that Noah Fafita and these guys are available in the fall. So they're not going to have this traditional spring game where they split up the teams and they have a scrimmage. They made it an interactive showcase. They brought fans to Arizona Stadium. They made it open to the public. They had fans on the field. There was a beer garden. There was live music. There was an Easter egg hunt for kids. And it was really something we hadn't seen at Arizona. And honestly, I think rather than just kind of shutting down the spring game, like a lot of programs are doing across the country, to engage with the fans and really take a step forward in something that they kind of failed at last year in public engagement. I thought it was a great way to punctuate the spring schedule. And like I said, it doesn't affect the wins and losses. Arizona's still coming off a 4-8 season, but I think the steps that they've taken in the spring are the right ones.
It was a lot of fun, right? It was a festive atmosphere. It felt like just a big party, a big celebration of Arizona football. Brought the community to into the building. There were activities for kids. There were beverages for adults. There was live music. I loved how they set up the fencing along the 25-yard line and then along the east sideline, where I mean you could just sidle up there and watch practice from field level, which fans don't get to do that very often, especially inside Arizona Stadium. So I think that was really cool. And I mean, let's face it, they need to sell tickets, right? They need to sell this product that was difficult. That was a difficult task the way last season went, the way last season ended, getting blown out by Arizona State, finished 4-8. You were predicted to be one of the contenders in the Big 12. Bad first impression by Brent Brennan and his staff. And as you mentioned, they've made a lot of really good moves, I think, in the offseason, positive moves, changed the offense and the offensive coordinator, brought in Joe Salavea. They seem like they, brought in some pretty good players in the transfer portal. They were extremely active. They rebuilt the running back room, the wide receiver room, among other positions. So I think all of those things are positives. I do want to pump the brakes a little bit on just sort of the glowing remarks from both coordinators at the end of the other night. Like, I appreciate the enthusiasm of Seth Doege and Danny Gonzalez, but hey, they have a lot to prove as coordinators, and this team has a lot to prove as far as, even just getting to 500 and making a bowl game. Like, they've got a long way to go, a lot of work to do. Hey, I love that Seth Doege loves his guy, Noah Fafita, saying he's the best quarterback in the league, and that might turn out to be true, but he certainly wasn't the best quarterback last year.
No.
And maybe a lot of that had to do with the offense that he was in and not having the same weapons that he had the year before. But I'm sure Noah would tell you the same thing. He has a lot to prove, even though he's going into basically his third year as a starter.
Well, and speaking of improving on things, after looking at this team through 5 weeks in the spring, what are some things that you like, and what are some things that you think Arizona should work on? Honestly, I think the speed that Arizona added at wide receiver. Listen, Tetairoa McMillan, we may not ever see another guy like that grace Arizona Stadium. We just may never ever see it. I mean, he is a once in a generation talent. He was a guy that, was the headliner of that loaded 2022 recruiting class that really brought Arizona out of the gutter and back to relevance. But I think collectively, Lev, this wide receiver group might actually be better than last year's. Like I said, you lose T-Mac, but man, the guys that they added, and also the guys who are rising too, I've been very impressed. Like, I mean, just starting at T-Mac's position, the X spot, Trey Spivey, the transfer from Kansas State. He played a couple years in Manhattan, but he was also kind of limited. So we didn't really see Trey Spivey as that guy out there on the outside. And I thought, so in spring, he made a lot of T-Mac-esque plays. Is he T-Mac? No, but man, he can elevate. He can catch balls with one hand. I mean, he could catch in traffic. And I've been very impressed with the kind of player that Trey Spivey is. And then a guy that is kind of, right behind him, or maybe even kind of like the 1A at X, is Brandon Phelps, the redshirt freshman from Phoenix, who's really a technician as a route runner, but he can create separation, and he can also jump up, high point some catches, and make those big time plays. So it hurts losing T-Mac, but I like Brandon Phelps and also Trey Spivey on the outside. And then, Chris Hunter coming back. I thought he really ascended in the second half of last season, really emerged as that wide receiver 2. And now, I mean, heck, he could be wide receiver 1 for the Arizona Wildcats. And he made really like 2 impressive acrobatic catches in that game against TCU and really flashed the kind of player that he can be. So I really like him right there at I think the Z spot. And then the slot guys, Nunu Watley, the guy from Chattanooga, he might be Arizona's fastest receiver. If it's not him, it's probably Isaiah Mizell, the freshman that they added from Orlando. And then I really like Chris Hudson, the transfer from Washington State. He's really developed a great connection with Noah Fafita. Luke Wysong is really a tough wide receiver that's going to go out and make plays and also be a special teams contributor. And I can go down the list. I just think collectively, Arizona's wide receivers are in a really good spot. I really like the running back position. My only concern is, though, Lev, it's great to have these receivers. It's great to have what Seth Diggy called the best quarterback in the Big 12. It don't mean nothing if you're not protecting that guy. And offensive line, while I have been impressed with some of the guys they've added, that is still a work in progress. And we're not even going to know what that O-line is going to look like until leading up to the season opener.
Quick question for you, Justin. How many players from the 2022 signing class are still with Arizona, especially given a couple guys who entered the portal earlier today? We're taping on Tuesday afternoon.
Yeah, Sterling Lane, Isaiah Johnson, those guys entered the portal.
Yep. How many guys are left?
Is Noah Fafita really in the only guy?
No, it's more than that. It's
okay.
It's 3 guys.
Okay.
Noah Fafita, Tyler Powell, and Grayson Stovall.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
That's it. Those are the only guys who've left. Who haven't left. So which just, sign of the times, right? Just tells you a lot about college football. Of course, when the coach who recruited that class leaves, he's going to take some guys with him, and he did. But I don't know. I just thought that was a funny stat, a fun fact. The offensive line is definitely the biggest lingering concern coming out of spring football. Like you said, I don't think we know what the composition of that group is going to be. I think the only sure thing, like the only guy who never played more than one position and was in the starting unit like every single practice was Alexander Deuced at right guard, right? He's kind of the constant. We saw Ty Buchanan, Tristan Bounds, Michael Wooten, Matthew Lotto rotating a tackle. We saw at the end of spring practice, maybe the last 2 or 3 spring practices, Chuba Ma'ai move from defensive tackle to offensive guard. And I think that's a smart move. They obviously feel pretty good about their defensive tackles if Isaiah Johnson's entering the portal. And they, obviously facilitated this move of Chuba from defense to offense. But we don't know how he's going to hold up physically. I mean, that's been a big conditioning. Has been a huge issue for him. You like 300-pounders. You don't necessarily like 375-pounders, right? So he's got a lot of work to do this offseason on his endurance, fitness, etc., so that he can remain healthy if he's going to be your starting left guard or maybe even your center. We saw Kaena DeCambra move over to center late in spring ball, and he's never played there before. So you wonder, are the snaps going to be consistent? Is he going to be able to make the line calls that you need to make? And then there's Rhino Tapatotai, who missed all of spring while he's rehabbing from an ACL, and he looked really good running around on the side. And they love his character and leadership and all of those things, but we don't know where he's going to fit into this mix. Like, is he going to go back to left tackle? Is he going to go to right tackle? Are they going to move him to guard? We don't know. So that is going to be the primary position that we're going to focus on, I think, in training camp. What does that offensive line look like? And is it going to get better? Because there were some practices this year where the defensive line really kicked their ass, and which is great news for the defensive line, but it's worrisome for the offensive line. And as you alluded to, the offense as a whole.
Yeah. I saw, guys like on the defensive side of the ball, Deshaun McKnight and Trey Smith and all these defensive linemen get in the backfield and make some plays. I'm like, oh, hey, look at that. That's a nice development. But on the other side, that doesn't really bode well for Arizona. And they have a handful of high school guys that they still need to add to that mix this summer. And, normally you don't like to rely on freshman offensive linemen, but, there are some guys that can play as freshmen. I'm looking at Sione Tohi, the guy from Mater Dei. I mean, this guy had offers from Alabama and USC and all of these, high level programs, and now he's coming to Arizona. Could this be kind of a Jonah Savinaya situation to where, he plays as a starting guard as a true freshman? I don't know. There's a lot of moving pieces, and I'm sure they're going to add some guys in the portal. I mean, they added an Albany offensive lineman, Chance Roberts, earlier on Tuesday. So, yeah, that's going to be a position group that, like you said, Lev, is going to be kind of the most interesting bunch as we get ready for the season opener. Also, I mean, on the defensive side of the ball, though, just impressions of those guys. I think, honestly, the MVP of spring ball, defensive tackle Deshaun McKnight, big number 99 right there in the middle. Lev might disagree with me on that, but I look at this guy, and I didn't really have any expectations for him. And next thing you know, he's getting TFLs, he's getting sacks, he's meeting guys at the line of scrimmage, and he's also dropping back into coverage too and making some plays there. And I really like that interior tandem of him and Tia Savea. If they can continue to build depth there, especially on the edges, like if they can really have a nice rotation of 7 to 9 guys, I think defensive line will certainly take a step in the right direction. And they need to, because, that was such a productive unit for Arizona in 2023. I mean, they had one of the top rushing defenses in college football. I think they were like top 20 or top 30 or something like that in that category. And then fast forward a year later, they're one of the worst rushing defenses in college football and also the Big 12. So I think those guys are going to be very important. And then behind them, linebacker, that's a very interesting situation, because in the last few years, Lev, we've only seen really 2 guys at linebacker, and under Danny Gonzalez, who was mentored by the great Rocky Long, maybe we're talking about, some 3 linebacker lineups for Arizona.
Yeah, when you talk about the edge rushers, Sterling Lane went into the portal today, and they might look a little thin.
Yeah.
There, I wonder if there's someone they're eyeing to bring in, or if they feel like Chancellor Owens or Malachi Bailey could show more than they showed in spring, which frankly wasn't that much. They were moving Chancellor Owens inside and outside, and they were praising his strength in the weight room, but that didn't necessarily translate that much on the football field. Malachi Bailey was injured for a chunk of camp and kind of worked his way back in at the end. I wonder if Riley Wilson is someone that they view as an edge rusher. Like you mentioned 3 linebacker, lineups, 3-3-5 versus 4-2-5. Like, is it just semantics? Like, it's just standing up versus being in a 3-point stance. Like, is Riley Wilson really a defensive end? Right. I know that Chase Kennedy has been working as a linebacker, but I think the best way for him to play is moving forward, rushing the quarterback. So I think those are guys that they view as edge rushers. So that alleviates the concerns a little bit when it comes to the edge position. As far as the MVP of spring, I would say it's got to be Genesis Smith.
Yeah, I knew you're going
to
go.
Right? Yeah, it's got to be Genesis. He may have, I don't know the exact count, but he might have had 6 interceptions.
Yeah.
During spring. Like, it was like almost every other practice he was picking off a ball. He's also kind of a big hitter. He's physical in the run game. He's really good at like diagnosing plays, and seeing the picture in front of him, breaking on the ball, breaking it up. He's a stud. Deshaun McKnight, I would say, it's kind of maybe my like breakout player, because we didn't have super duper high expectations for him, and he looked really good. Someone who was an outside linebacker, I think about 215 pounds, coming out of high school, whose body just kept getting bigger and bigger, and he's retained some of that athleticism. That's why you were able to you would see him dropping into coverage and, maybe chasing down a running back on a screen pass or something like that. So, yeah, he was good. And I think getting Tia Savea back was a big deal too. Those guys really established themselves on the inside as the number 1 and number 2 defensive tackles. Tia technically was a member, I guess, of the class of 22 if you include the transfers. That's when he first got here. But I was, obviously earlier only referring to high school players. But yeah, I think the defense is going to be a little more exotic, right? I think you're going to get more looks, more blitzes, more of an effort to disguise and deceive the opposition and confuse the quarterback. And I want to circle back real quick to the offensive line. And one thing I think that's worth mentioning is they're going to try to compensate for whatever the offensive line shortcomings are by number 1, like you said at the top, with Noah getting the ball out quickly. Okay. That's number 1. And number 2, playing with tempo, right? Having a hurry up, no huddle offense where the defense might want to sub and they might not be able to sub because you're getting a first down and you're completing passes. They emphasize fitness so much. We talked about it, I think, on a previous pod, the drill where they're basically just respotting the ball at different places, and the defensive and offensive linemen have to run to the spot and get ready. I mean, I've never seen a drill like that in practice before, but I think it's a really good idea. I really liked the concept behind that.
And sometimes if you just wear down a team, that's all you need. The Arizona's offensive line may be in situations to where they're outmatched throughout the game, but their endurance can maybe bog down the opposing defense. And you got to be in shape. And that's why I'm saying, like, Chuba Ma'ai, if he wants to start and have a prominent role on this Arizona offensive line, you got to be in shape, man. You got to run because, it's one thing to, last 4 quarters earlier in the season, but how are you going to look in November when, you've had essentially an entire season under your belt and you've just been running the entire time? So it's going to be important. All right, Lev. Now moving over to kind of this post spring part that Arizona's in between now and the season opener against Hawaii in August. Arizona, they definitely need some bodies. This roster is before the transfer portal departures. Arizona's roster was at like 93 players. That includes walk-ons. This 105 player limit will be in effect coming up here, or we think it's expected to.
There could be they could do a grandfathering in of the roster situation. We don't know that for sure. So it might be a bit of a moving target, but it seems like 105 is the goal at this point. And I think they have 19 high school and junior college players still coming in, which is a lot. So I think you're going to see a few more guys entering the portal here. We mentioned it, Sterling Lane, Isaiah Johnson, Elijah Brown, a cornerback that they had brought in up from junior college, who I guess they, didn't think that he was quite what they were looking for at that position. Cash Peterman, one of the contenders for kicking or punting or even long snapping toward the end there. Your rival long snapper, Justin. He's entered the portal. And they brought in one already, this offensive lineman, Chance Roberts.
And Kenny Dillingham talked about, I'm already talking about cutting players. I'm already having these uncomfortable conversations. And I tried to ask Brent Brennan about that after the spring game, and he was just like, the roster's not set as of now. But there's going to be some uncomfortable conversations, Lev.
Yeah, there are. There always are, but there might be more of them than usual because of these new roster limits, whereas before they could go up to 120 players. Now you're looking at 105, and they have to create room for the guys that they're planning to bring in. And we think they're also going to bring in a long snapper. We know they're going to bring in a long snapper because they don't have one right now. Justin is out of eligibility, unfortunately. And probably going to bring in a punter or kicker, a veteran punter or kicker, to compete or supplement what they have. I don't think they want Michael Salgado Medina to do everything, right?
No.
So sort of pick a lane and stay in that lane. Pretty sure they're going to bring in another tight end, the way that that position was talked about by the coaching staff over the last few days. That Daggy pretty much conceded that that's one of the positions where there's only a few guys that they really trust at the moment. They've got Kellen Ford coming in, really sought after and highly touted freshman, but he's just a freshman, right? So I think a veteran tight end. And they addressed the interior offensive line already, but I could see another corner. I could see another edge rusher, depending on who's out there from the transfer market. So still a lot of movement, still some needs to address, assuming they don't lose any frontline guys between now and Friday. You never know how these things will go. I think you're more looking for role players than starters at this point, unless some very specific situation pops up where that player, Arizona wants that player, and that player wants to come here, and they'd be an upgrade at one of those spots.
Yeah, I think really offensively, just adding depth on the O-line and tight end, that's kind of their number one focus right now. Defensively, with Elijah Brown going into the portal, I already had always thought that they needed another cornerback, even with Elijah Brown. Now they definitely need another cornerback. Maybe Traden Stukes is a guy that can move out there. Like, there's just so many moving pieces that we'll kind of get more answers to, as we get closer to the season. But yeah, defense, edge rusher, I think is a position group that they should go after. I really like the linebackers they have. I really like the safeties that they have too. I'd probably just say edge rusher and cornerback. And then
I would agree.
Guys.
I would agree. They've got a couple defensive tackles from the junior college ranks that they like.
Yeah.
Right. One is Ezra Funa. And what's the kid's name from Kansas?
Zach Siulepa.
Zach Siulepa, right. He's the one who's also originally from New Zealand.
Yeah.
Right. I want to say, and it's like a giant dude, like 6'7", 350 or something of that nature. I can't wait to see what he looks like.
6'7", 365 pounds.
Yeah.
It's a big boy.
That is a large human being. Not a lot of people like that walking this earth, let alone, coordinated and athletic enough to play football. So we'll see what he's all about. But they must like those guys. Because like I said, they moved one of their defensive tackles to offense and another one has gone into the portal, with their blessing. So
is Siulepa the third down D tackle? Because he's so big, he can like bat down passes.
I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know. I mean, I watched this film and it was like, it was like just almost like high school film to a degree, because he's just so much bigger than everybody else that he's facing. You'll occasionally see a guy in high school who's just that much bigger than all of the guys that he's going up against. And it just looks kind of funny that way. So we'll see what he does against, college players who know what they're doing.
All right, Lev. Now let's transition over to something that's happening on Thursday through Saturday. We've got the NFL draft. And for the second year in a row, Arizona's going to have a first-round pick. How about that? For so many years, it was like, will Arizona even get a draft pick? And now it's like, hey, Arizona's got 2 first-rounders in back-to-back years. Jordan Morgan last year going 25 to the Green Bay Packers, and now Tetairoa McMillan. Not Tet. Tetairoa, T-Mac, Nalo, Tetairoa. Man, this is going to be fun, Lev. The draft is in Green Bay, and T-Mac will be at Lambeau Field. But it's where T-Mac is going to land that everyone is talking about. And also, one thing that's been so fascinating about this whole process is the amount of comments surrounding T-Mac that are very just different. Like I told you this yesterday. I'm like, I feel like T-Mac is like hands down the most polarizing NFL draft prospect that Arizona has ever produced, because it just seems like he is under the microscope at all times. Like every little thing that he does gets nitpicked. And, he's a very kind of laid back, Cali cool kind of guy. And some people view that as like, oh, he's nonchalant. He doesn't care. Like, I'm like, no, that's just kind of his personality and who he is. Turn on the tape, look at the kind of player that he is. Going back to his days when he was at Servite High School to his days at Arizona. I mean, T-Mac had every opportunity to really shut things down and say, like, you know what? I'm getting ready for the NFL draft. Like, oh, he doesn't care? Well, I mean, he could have sat out the entire season when he was dealing with that leg injury. He was already a first-round pick last summer. He could have easily sat out and prepared for the NFL draft after suffering a leg injury in the spring, but he still played at Arizona because it was important to finish off his career, and he wanted to get Bobby Wade's record. Well, fast forward to losing to TCU. He passed Bobby Wade for career receiving yards, and Arizona wasn't going to a bowl game. And so I'm like putting all these factors in my head. I'm like, hey, T-Mac, I got to ask you, are you going to play in the Territorial Cup? Are you going to opt out? And he said, I'm going to play, and he did. He could have said, nah, I'm getting ready for the draft, but like he stayed committed to his time at Arizona, and I think there's something to be said about that. And the comments regarding T-Mac, I don't get it. I really don't.
Sometimes I feel like I'm just losing my mind when I read some of the things that I've read and hear some of the things that I've heard. Okay. Todd McShay used to be at ESPN. He's now with The Ringer. I really like Todd McShay. I think he's one of the best in the business, extremely thorough, well-sourced, etc. Put out his final top 300. He put T-Mac 50th.
Yeah.
50 overall. Okay. But to give you some idea of how polarizing a prospect T-Mac might be, McShay also said that T-Mac could be drafted as high as number 5 by the Jacksonville Jaguars. Okay, this is a hot rumor right now, and I'll try to explain why this might happen. Do you know who Jacksonville's new head coach is? That would be Liam Cohen, right?
Oh, Duval.
Yes, former Liam Cohen was a former offensive coordinator with the Rams. He was at Kentucky a couple times. Last year, he was with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Justin, who is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers' best wide receiver for the past decade?
That would be Mike Evans.
Right. And who is a player that T-Mac's game might be similar to?
Mike Evans.
Mike Evans. When Trevor Lawrence, the Jacksonville Jaguars quarterback, was at his best at Clemson, who was his top receiver? T. Higgins.
T. Higgins, yeah.
Who's another player that T-Mac's game has been compared to throughout this process? T. Higgins, right? You pair Tetairoa McMillan with Brian Thomas, who was a steal at number 18 or wherever Jacksonville got him last year. Wow, what a dynamic duo that would be. And that might be what finally unlocks Trevor Lawrence and gets him to be the player that he is capable of being. I also read somewhere or heard somewhere that Jacksonville has a very analytics oriented front office. And if you look at a lot of the the PFF grades and a lot of the advanced stuff with T-Mac, he comes out ranks very high in a lot of those categories, So I think that's the ceiling for T-Mac in this draft. Number 5, I think 18 is the floor for him. The pick at number 18 as of now is Seattle. And Seattle moved on from DK Metcalf in the offseason, who was their big X outside receiver. They traded him to Pittsburgh. That would be a natural fit. You put T-Mac with Jackson Smith and Jigba. Boom. There you go. There's another dynamic receiving duo. I think number 12, Dallas, is another spot right in the middle there of those two where T-Mac could land. I think that a lot of teams are overthinking it. I think they're overanalyzing their perceptions of his personality which, I mean, he's, like you said, he's laid back. You know, he's a little different, right? He's not gonna just come in there and be like a braggadocious alpha diva number one receiver. Like you see a lot of guys have that kind of personality when they play that position. I think it was Brett Arcee who said it best, like actions speak louder than words, right? Just look at how he plays, look at what he's done, look at the decisions that he has made. You alluded to him deciding to play. Like he didn't have to play. And I swear every other week, Justin, we would get tweets and we would get emails and we would get questions from people. Is he gonna opt out? Is T-Mac gonna play? Is he gonna, like, if they fall out of bowl contention? Over and over and over again, did not opt out. He could have opted out in another way during that last offseason by going to another school. Right? Like he could have made literally millions of dollars and he could have just said, you know what? Give me that check. I'm just going to go for the paycheck. He did not do that because he's a loyal person. He's loyal to his school and loyal to his best friend, Noah Fafita. Does he get any credit for that anywhere in the media ever? Like I hear people praising the character of other players. You know, this guy's we before me. That's what T-Mac is too. And he never gets any credit for it whatsoever. And I just don't understand it.
I like the teams that you suggested picking up Tetairoa McMillan because those other teams already have like prominent wide receiver one guys. And I think T-Mac is capable of being a wide receiver one. I'm not saying that he is not capable of that. But when you look at like his first couple years at Arizona, you know, he had a Dorian Singer, he had a Jacob Cowing, right? He had a complementary piece that allowed him to be great. Where this last year, he was bracketed, he was double teamed, and yet he was still uber productive. But I think going to a situation like Jacksonville, where you got, Brian Thomas, even the Dallas Cowboys at number 12
CD
overall.
Lamb, yep.
CD Lamb, like as much as it pisses me off thinking about Jerry Jones constantly referring to him as Tet, I think that would be a great situation for T-Mac. But yeah, I agree with you, Lev. I think that anywhere from heck, I'd even say as high as number 4. I mean, with the New England Patriots, I don't think that's what's going to happen.
I think they're going to take an offensive tackle. I don't think it's the offensive tackle everyone thinks they're going to take. But
not Campbell?
I don't think so.
No? Okay.
I would look at Membu from Missouri.
Okay.
Much higher upside. Super athletic. I don't think there are concerns about Will Campbell whether he can be a tackle.
Oh, because of his arm length?
Yeah, because of his arm length. Yeah. So there's one more thing I want to say about T-Mac before we move on to a couple of the other prospects that Arizona has. And I think there's an anti-Arizona bias out there in this sense, if he was the exact same player and played for Alabama or Auburn or LSU or Texas or Florida, you know what conference all of those teams are in, right? Exact same player playing for those schools. I don't think people would have the same concerns and criticisms about him. I really don't. I don't think that Arizona prospects get quite the same respect because, I mean, like you said, they've not really produced a lot of NFL draft prospects in recent years, right? I mean, they've been shut out a bunch of times. And I think there's also kind of a, if you play in the SEC, it elevates your stock. And maybe some of that is legitimate because you're playing against some of the best players in the country on the other side of the ball. But I think that's a little bit of what's baked into this too.
All right, Lev, let me ask you this before we get to Jonas Avianea and some of these other guys.
Yeah.
Who is a better prospect coming out? Marvin Harrison last year or T-Mac this year?
There we go. I said in a tweet a couple months ago, I think, that I thought T-Mac was a better prospect, and everybody just lost their minds and said I was crazy. And I understand it because he was a consensus top 5 player throughout the process and ended up going, I think, 4th Is that where
Yep.
he ended up
Fourth.
being drafted by the Cardinals? And it seems like the best case scenario for T Mac is going to be 5. It could be later than that. I just think that they're similar sized players. I think T Mac's a little more athletic to me. I think he's got a little bit more fluidity. He's like a little more agile, a little more flexible. I
The vertical too.
Marvin Harrison is a very good player and had a kind of an underrated first season. I mean, I think if you had to do it over again in that draft, that Malik Neighbors would be the first guy that you take at the receiver position, and Brian Thomas would be second, Marvin third, Odunze fourth. That wasn't the order that they were picked. It was Harrison, Neighbors, Odunze, Thomas. But I think that T-Mac stacks up right up there with Marvin Harrison. That is not a common a common evaluation of him, but that's what I see.
All right, now moving over to the other guys, Big Jonah Savianaya. Hey, there's a chance he gets picked up late in that first round. Honestly, my dream scenario for Big Jonah is going to Detroit, which is crazy to say, but in the year 2025, the Detroit Lions are a very good franchise, and man, they have a really good right tackle in Penei Sewell, and it gets me giddy thinking about just the rushing attack for Detroit with Big Jonah and Penei Sewell on that right side. Big Jonah, I mean, he projects as a guard, but he can also play tackle in a pinch, which I think makes him extremely valuable as an NFL draft prospect. I would love to see him go late in the first round. Will it happen? Maybe not, but regardless of whether it's late Thursday or maybe even early Friday, we're going to see Big Jonah get selected. And you know what, Lev? He might actually have maybe a longer NFL career than a guy like Tetairoa McMillan. I think T-Mac is going to be a great player, don't get me wrong, but Big Jonah at right guard, I mean, he could have a 10 to 12 NFL or at 10 to 12 year NFL career at that spot.
Yeah, I mean, someone who is a starter from day one as an offensive lineman, you just don't see that very often. He was extremely durable, suffered one notable injury in his entire career toward the end of his junior year. He played multiple positions. He was completely unselfish, the super high marks in terms of his character. He worked out really well at the combine. Like, he did everything and he did great. I think you're going to the ceiling for him, in my opinion, where he maybe you could that range for Jonah starting with your team, Justin, number 22, the Chargers. I think 24 Minnesota, 25 Houston is really one that I've got circled because they badly need offensive line help, and he would make a ton of sense for them. 28 Detroit, as you mentioned, 31 Kansas City, and 32 Philadelphia are others where he would make a lot of sense to me. He's probably going to be a guard in the NFL, and that kind of pushes your stock down a little bit. But like you said, he can play tackle in an emergency, and usually NFL teams dress 8 offensive linemen per game, and there's 5 spots, so you got 3 backups, and stuff happens, right? So if someone can play multiple positions, that is a good thing. And the floor, you're the one who brought up this idea, Justin, and I really like it. It might be 37. That would be the Las Vegas Raiders in round 2. And who's on the Raiders staff now?
That would be a Carroll.
That's right. That would be a Brendan Carroll, who is the former offensive line coach here at Arizona. Is reunited with his, with his dad, Pete, with the Raiders. It was Brennan who recruited Jonah, brought him over here, coached him up. That would be a great landing spot for him as well. It doesn't always work out that way where someone who's a coach, used to be a coach in college, now in the pros, they don't always take their guys. But I think in this case, it makes a lot of sense.
And then looking at the other guys going into day 3, because Jonah's going to go in day 2 at the latest.
Yep.
But day 3 gets really interesting because now you got kicker Tyler Loop. Kickers only really a couple get picked up during the NFL draft. I think Tyler Loop was one of, if not the best kicker in college football last season. Obviously, the awards didn't really reflect that, but is it because he played at Arizona? I don't know. Because, Tyler Loop was so effective last year, and the only times that he really missed field goals, I think you could probably maybe chalk up 1 or 2 to just him missing it. But a majority of his misses last year were because of the operation, because of a poor hold by Michael Salgado Medina. But outside of that, he was a weapon for Arizona. And there were a couple of times where Tyler Loop kept Arizona in the game. I look at that win over Utah on the road in Salt Lake City. Tyler Loop kept them in that game. You look at that game against Texas Tech. He had 5 field goals in that matchup. And then he also had a 62-yard field goal, which is the longest field goal in Arizona history and the only field goal to go over 60 yards. So he's got the leg strength. Danny Gonzalez, the former special teams coordinator, who's now the DC at Arizona, he coached Tyler last year, and he said he's the strongest leg that he's ever seen. He is an NFL guy. And whether he goes drafted late or if he goes as an undrafted free agent, I think Tyler Loop is going to have more than just a cup of coffee in the NFL. I think this is a guy that can really stay. And then at running back, you got Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt. Really an interesting situation because, he came over to Arizona after his 1 season at New Mexico, and apparently he didn't have any more eligibility. And some things got lost in the mix. He thought his freshman season was a redshirt year. And there was just kind of a lot of messiness that went into that situation. But he was flagged for eligibility concerns. He missed the last 11 games of the season. But, man, you can make an argument that none of the Arizona Wildcats who are draft eligible had a better draft process than Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt because he killed it at the East-West Shrine Bowl. Rushed for 97 yards, a couple touchdowns, was named the MVP of that game. Had the fastest 40 time out of all the running backs at Big 12 Pro Day. Also showed that he is one of the strongest running backs coming out of the Big 12. So I think even though Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt didn't really display the goods during his last season at Arizona, I think the tape from that one game against New Mexico, his season last year at New Mexico as well, coupled with his offseason, I think Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt has positioned himself into possibly getting drafted. Now, unfortunately for him, this class is loaded with running backs. So there is a possibility that Ja'Cory does not get picked up. But I look at those 2 guys as guys that you could hear their names called on Saturday.
Yeah, I'll start with Tyler Loop. I think he's a better prospect than Lucas Haversick coming out just because he's more consistent in terms of accuracy. Leg just as strong as anybody's. Like you said, 60-plus yard field goal. Anything inside 60, makeable, doable. Also, the highest character you could possibly want. Great kid, very mature. He's getting married, I think, this offseason. So if he doesn't get drafted, he will be a priority free agent and he will be competing for a job this upcoming training camp. Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt is a really interesting one. I saw a 7-round mock draft that had him going in the 6th round. I've seen lists from draft analysts, best player at each position who did not participate in the combine, with Ja'Cory being the pick at running back. Did very well on the circuit, the all-star circuit. And I think you can make a case that him not playing this past year is actually beneficial for him, right? He didn't miss time because of an injury, and he also didn't take 200 hits that he would have taken otherwise, right? So plenty of tread left on those tires. It is a very, very deep running back class, like crazy deep. And I think that hurts him. But he could see his name come off in the 6th or 7th round to be sure. And that would be I think like a good happy ending for someone who I'm sure it was a very frustrating situation for him to not be able to play this past year. And I know you have a big story coming out on Jacory's journey, his saga. That'll be on our website probably by the time that people listen to this podcast.
Oh, no doubt. I think it might already be live right now at the time we're recording this. But all right, Lev, before we get out of here, let's say you're a GM of a team comes up to you, Michael Lev, and says, Lev, we're choosing a quarterback in this draft. All the quarterbacks are available. Who are you choosing?
Yeah, I mean, I think Cam Ward is the obvious choice here. It is not a strong quarterback class at all. And like the latest rumblings that I've been hearing from listening to various podcasts, reading stories, and just immersing myself in the draft is it might be a one quarterback first round this year. I mean, Shedeur might fall all the way out of the first round. It's conceivable. I know Jackson Dart, some teams really like him. Some teams don't. I don't think he's a finished product by any means. Has like a lot of the athletic traits and size and things that you like, but kind of inconsistent at Ole Miss. And sometimes I wonder, like, Lane Kiffin is such a good offensive coordinator that he makes it easy for guys sometimes, so not having that. And then Shedeur, man, I mean, I actually like Shedeur.
Me too.
I think he's really tough, but he's got a fatal flaw and he holds onto the ball too long. I mean, he took a gazillion sacks, and you can blame some of that on Colorado's offensive line, but some of that's on Shedeur too. And there was a player back in the day named Rob Johnson, played at USC. He's from Orange County, and that was his fatal flaw. He made it to the NFL and played for several years, but he had that bad habit. And usually guys who have that is a hard habit to break. You saw it with Caleb Williams in his rookie year with the Bears. There are certain times he just held the ball too long. I posted these stats about, Shedeur's time to throw compared to his ADOT. Okay. Like, you'd think if someone had a really high time to throw, that they'd also have a really high ADOT. For him, he had a high time to throw and a low ADOT because they threw so many screen passes, right? Like, the ball's getting out of your hands fast from screen passes. You should not have a high average time to throw.
Yeah.
Right. So what's happening on those plays that aren't screens, right? You're holding the ball. You're not reading the defense quickly and assessing things. That's something that Noah Fafita struggled with last year too. So I think Cam Ward is far and away the best quarterback in this class. I mean, is he the number one prospect in this class? No, but he's going to go number one because of supply and demand. Right. There's just a dearth of quarterbacks when you're in the position that the Tennessee Titans are in right now. You gotta take the swing and see if you hit a home run or at least a double. Cam is interesting. We saw him at Washington State.
What I was going to bring up, it just hit me that he is the guy that replaced Jaden DeLora at Wazoo.
Right. Yep. It's all connected in some form or fashion. Right. So he's kind of a gunslinger a little bit. He's got kind of a casual way that he plays the game. It's a little reminiscent of Aaron Rodgers sometimes, the way it's kind of like backpedal and just sidearm a ball in there. Maybe a little Patrick Mahomes-ish in that way too. And that can work if you're studious and you make good decisions with the football. So yeah, he's the guy. No questions asked, and he might be the only guy at the quarterback position who gets taken in the first round on Thursday.
Man, I'm looking at Pittsburgh late because they need a quarterback. Yeah, we don't. Speaking of Aaron Rodgers, we don't know what he's going to do. I would think that Aaron Rodgers is going to end up signing with Pittsburgh when it's all said and done. But Omar Khan said we're going into training camp with 4 quarterbacks. There's 2 on the roster right now. So, however we get those 2 quarterbacks, we'll find out. But I think one of those quarterbacks is Aaron Rodgers. The other one is the future late in that first round. I think, honestly, it's going to be Shedeur.
It could be.
I think Shedeur is going to Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I think if Shedeur gets picked in the first round, that is a logical landing spot for him at number 21. It's always also possible that a team like the Browns or the Giants, who picks second and third, could trade up from the second round into the late first round to grab a quarterback, whether that's Shedeur or Jackson Dart. You want to do that if you're going to take one anyway, because you get that extra year at the end, that team option for a fifth year. So you can kind of extend the rookie pay scale for one more season. You could see a team do that for sure. And Shedeur might be the guy. He also, he comes with, I don't know if baggage is the right word, but there's always kind of the circus around the Sanders family, and you wonder or worry a little bit whether that's going to be a distraction or just something that maybe you don't want to have in your building and around your organization. I think that I don't think that'll be a huge problem for him. I think Deion Sanders understands, like, hey, this is professional football and I need to cut the umbilical cord here. At some point, I'm in college. He's going off and living his life. But it is definitely something that's being discussed in organizational meeting rooms leading up to the draft.
You think Cleveland's going to trade up and maybe get Shedeur in addition to Travis Hunter?
Yeah, wouldn't that be cool if they did that? I think totally. That'd be a heck of a story if they did it. And it's certainly within the realm of possibilities for them. I think Travis Hunter is super interesting too, as a player who's going to try to play both ways. And we've really never seen anyone who's fully committed to the bit like that. We've seen guys like Champ Bailey dabble on offense, or Charles Woodson dabble. Deion himself dabbled on offense, but those guys are really full-time defensive backs and part-time offensive players. So I don't know how he's going to be announced when his name is called. Like, is it going to be cornerback / receiver / cornerback from Colorado, Travis Hunter?
FB,
I don't know.
Football.
Right?
Or football player.
Football player. Yeah. I mean, he's obviously a stud, and I think his value is that he can do all of those things, right? But you wonder, like, if he devoted all of his time to one side, could he be like the best player at that position? He's a little on the thin side, small side for a wide receiver. It kind of reminds me of Devontae Smith as a wide. I think Devontae Smith was, I want to say, 6th pick in the draft.
Yes.
When he came out, I'll look that up while we're talking here. But yeah, it would be cool. It would definitely be fun and cool if both of those guys ended up in Cleveland.
Cleveland of all places. From Colorado to Cleveland, Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders. All right. Well,
Devontae Smith was the 10th pick in the 2021 draft at 6 feet, 170 pounds. So Travis is a little bigger than that, but that's about as high as you'll ever see like a sub 185 pound receiver go in the draft. And Devontae Smith has obviously been very good since the Eagles got him.
Can't wait for the NFL draft Thursday night at Lambeau Field in Green Bay, Wisconsin. We'll see where T-Mac gets picked up on Thursday. Maybe Big Jonas Avianea also gets selected too.
Maybe Jordan Morgan will be in the green room with T-Mac. Huh?
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Never know, right? Yeah, I don't know if Jordan's out there in Green Bay or if he's back here. Maybe he'll go back to Green Bay just for the occasion. I don't know. We'll see.
That'll be a lot of fun. All right, we'll have stories leading up to the NFL draft, and also after draft. We'll have all the coverage on Tucson.com. And we got U of A baseball. We got U of A softball in action. There's a lot of things happening in Tucson, Arizona, and also in the Arizona Wildcats realm. So for all the coverage, man, go to Tucson.com, download the Wildcaster mobile app off the App Store and Google Play. And as always, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and comment the Wildcast podcast wherever you get your podcast. Thank you guys for listening and also watching on Tucson.com.